All right, everyone, what's going on? I'm here today with Nick Perdomo, owner of Perdomo Cigars. Perdomo's a vertically integrated tobacco company, and today we're going to find out what got Nick started in the business and what makes Perdomo Cigars one of the leading iconic cigar brands in the industry right now. So, Nick, thanks for doing this.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, just to get things more acquainted and familiar, can you please provide us like a brief history on the establishment of Perdomo Cigars and how has the brand evolved over the past 3 decades?
Well, we started 30 years ago, and a little over 30 years ago. Started in 1992. I actually started out in my garage. My family been long in the industry, in the tobacco industry, but I actually started because it was something I wanted to do, and my father wasn't really keen on it. I had a very good job. I was an air traffic controller here in the United States, here in Miami, and I had mentioned my father, I want to get in the cigar industry. And he said, "Oh, that's crazy. You got a great job and so on." And I said, "Well, you told me that if I work hard, I can attain anything I want in life." My dad came from Cuba with basically shirt off his back after the disaster of the Cuban Revolution, and people had to, beat feet to get out of Cuba. And my father was a great inspiration to me. He worked his butt off, worked two or three jobs and taught me a lot about determination and focus. And I knew I do it. I never thought I'd get to where we are today. I wanted to, my dream was always that I could sell 100,000 cigars in a year.
Wow.
And the company today manufactures over 100,000 cigars a day. So,
Yeah.
my father was right. If you work hard, you can attain anything you want. And we started very meager. And in 1994, we moved to Esteli, Nicaragua, and it was very, it was very unique in the sense that the country had a lot of strife and so on and so on. And we had no electricity, we had no water. I remember asking my dad, "Why are we here?" And my dad would always point to the ground. He said, "Look at these grounds. There's nothing like it in the world." When I manufactured cigars at H. Upman, if I knew the Nicaraguan system, maybe I wouldn't have done so much in Cuba. You know what I mean? So
Really? Wow.
yeah, the Nicaraguan grounds are the best in the world for a variety of reasons. One, they're volcanic. Two, they have no lead. Three, they have up to 13 and 14 hours of sunshine. We have a tremendous amount of water. And technology wise, we have companies like Bayer and so on. And really, all the great masters from Cuba did one thing: they left Cuba. The average Cuban in 1959 was making 157 American dollars a month. The average Cuban today makes about $17 a month. There's no freedom. I could go on and on. And that's what changed. And I remember telling Marvin Shankin from Cigar Aficionado years ago that you can imagine the Dominican Republic was above the roof here, and then you had Honduras, and then you had Mexico, the Canary Islands, even the Bahamas were producing more cigars than Nicaragua. And I told him
Right.
Nicaragua would bypass Honduras one day, and everybody laughed at me. And today, Nicaragua, for sure, in America, is the number one imported cigar. No doubt, we've not only bypassed Honduras and the Dominican Republic, we bypassed both of them combined. We're seeing it worldwide, where the Nicaraguan cigars are getting more and more popular. They burn very well. They have a lot of strength. They have a lot of complexity, richness, aroma, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's just you can't beat it. And I'm proud of
And
what we.
and Nicaragua's also bypassed Cuba in terms of volume, as far as I'm aware. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and
That
it's
was in recent times, I think, just 2019, or was it a little before or after?
just recently. You never know with the Cubans because they always lie about their numbers. So
Wow.
normally in the industry, what we do is whatever they say they produce, we usually cut it by 50%. And that's usually probably the truth of the matter is. But look, my family's from Cuba. We have yeah. I want to stay focused on Nicaragua. What makes Nicaragua so special. And
Absolutely.
we moved there in '94. We've been there, almost 30 years. The country's really evolved in the sense that we have no unemployment. Pretty much everybody works in the cigar industry in the northern coast of Nicaragua. The
Yeah.
Nicaraguan government is very good to the cigar manufacturers and the businesses, and we're just proud. We have over 5,000 employees in Nicaragua. The average employee's been with our company for over 20 years, to be exact, about 20 years and 7 months. And I always say this, but the truth of the matter is the greatest asset of Perdomo Cigars is certainly not the guy you're looking at. It's our workforce. And
I have
I've
heard you say that before. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So So it's been a lot of fun. My son's now in the industry. He's the fourth generation. He's our director of sales, and he's home with his wife. They just had a baby, so I just got blessed with my second granddaughter. And
Congratulations.
thank you very much. And things are really good, and we're moving, and we're continuing to grow. And today we're in 57 different countries around the world, and we're continuing to move forward. And we're proud of our heritage, but we're also proud of Nicaragua, very much so.
That's beautiful. So I mentioned earlier when I was doing the introduction that Perdomo Cigars is a vertically integrated cigar company. Can you just briefly go over what advantages that provides you as a business over other brands, for example, that have to go through other factories to get their tobacco and source differently?
Yeah, what happened was in 1998, there's an old Italian saying that says, sometimes you buy the clam and you get the can. I was getting mad at buying tobacco and seeing tobaccos that were mixed. They weren't up to the grades that we wanted. And I remember telling my father when he was alive that the only way we were going to be able to sit on the top of the hill here is to be vertically integrated. And what we did is we brought a guy named Aristides Garcia in the latter part of 98. He's probably the best tobacco man in the world. He just celebrated his 81st year in the tobacco industry. I decided I was going to build my own boxes. I was going to build my own genetic department. I was really resolute about it, and I was super hyper focused to do it. And today, the company actually does everything. We have our own genetic department. We develop our own seeds. We have our own agronomy department. And today, we grow. We're one of the largest growers in the world. We're growing almost 2,000 acres of ground for tobacco. That's pretty vast in the three most fertile regions in Nicaragua. Like I said earlier, we manufacture our own box. We even make our own staples. We do everything. And what that does is that not only gives you attention to detail, but what it does is it gives you top quality, using fertilizers from Bayer in Western Germany, from using satellite imagery for all your crops, to using inferred heat to be able to produce the exact amounts of parts per millions of fertilizers that you need for each field. We just don't say this is that's the lead. We're going to put a complete formula like most people do. We have it visible via satellite on lot numbers. For example, where you're at, let's say you were 5 feet away from me, if you're by a riverbed, the grounds there are not going to be as heavy as me just being 5 feet away from you, because you're going to have water erosion underneath. So all these satellites will tell us that, and that's how we've been able to build consistency with the different brands that we have here, the different brands that we have here behind me. That's not a green screen. This is basically all the.
Those are all real cigars, eh? Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So, from everything from milling and selecting our woods to the selection of seed, the proper amount of curing, fermentation, and aging. There's not a cigar that we put out that doesn't have at least 60 months on that tobacco. There's not one cigar that we make that hasn't, once it's been made, it hasn't been in an aging room and marrying of its flavors for a minimum of 180 days. And this is what builds consistency and quality. Every single cigar we make is draw tested. We draw test over 113,000 cigars a day. I don't think a cigar that should be put in a box that doesn't draw. I don't know how you guys can smoke some of these cigars and some of them don't draw. And if you look at the bottom of the box, I know who rolled the cigar. I knew who the store team was. We actually checked the cigar 18 times before we put it in the box. My mom always said that you do things right and you don't do them at all. And I have this big belief that it takes 10 years to get a customer. It takes 3 seconds to lose one. I hope the Canadian market gets to enjoy more Perdomo cigars. And I know things are tough in your market. Your government is restrictive as hell. But
no question. Yeah.
People want great.
Yeah. Oh, no. I was just saying, without question, our government continues to restrict us further and further with the additional plain packaging, and health warning labels is now on the rise. They want to increase the surface area of the box. So that box that you have in front of you, first of all, we don't get those boxes anymore. Right now, they're offered in like plastic bundles when the distribution ships them over to our shop, and then they're gonna start. On top of that, they're talking about in legislation to have 75% of the entire bundle covered with health warning labels. So it will just further kind of reduce the visibility of the cigars in of itself. And that's one of the things we're trying to combat here as a business, and trying to keep our communities thriving, and trying to do podcasts like these, because it's one of the few things that that's left to keep us intact as whole. It's like all cigar lovers and cigar enthusiasts around our community, they don't want any part of this. But unfortunately, the people that are involved in making the decisions and enforcing these laws, we don't believe they've ever smoked a cigar in their lives, but yet they're responsible for showing us how to enjoy our cigars, and that's kind of why we're doing what we do right now.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. You guys are running a legal operation. It's a legal product, and they treat you like you're selling drugs. And a lot of times, in a lot of these countries, they allow the drugs to be sold and distributed and used, but they come after the cigar industry. And listen, I'm not real fond of the administrations running your country today, nor am I fond of the new administration we have running our country today, with a lot of regulations, higher taxes, and so on. And hopefully in the future, both of our countries will go back to more sane governments that leave people alone and let private industry move forward and continue growing.
Without question. I want to go back and just touch up on the quality of the Perdomo blend in of itself. When I first started smoking cigars, like about 7, 8 years ago, I think it was, I was always around my dad and watching him sell to other customers, and I just naturally got curious on how, cigars taste and how they smoke and how they're intended to be enjoyed. One of the first ones that I was recommended to pick up, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot, it's the 10th anniversary, the champagne, because of its mildness. But I truly do remember the quality and the consistency of the burn. It's one of the things that stuck out with me compared to other cigars. How do you guys manage to keep that quality control so high? Because I have truly never had a bad Perdomo cigar in my entire life, in my entire duration of this business. And I'm sure a lot of our friends and customers can testify to that as well. And when I have somebody come in the shop and ask me, hey, I'm looking for a consistent cigar with refined characters, smooth balance, and all I always go towards one of the few lineups that I have in mind is Perdomo. So what is it about the quality of and the consistency of the blend, and how do you guys keep those standards so high for so long?
Well, the main thing, and I actually believe that starts with the seed and the seed development. The next thing is growing the tobacco properly and using the exact amounts of fertilization and tobacco needs. Then it has to go to the proper curing channels, which we're real resolute in doing it correctly. And then it has to be the fermentation, the sorting and selecting, and the aging of the product. Those are the first and foremost things where a lot of people cut corners, unfortunately. And that basically takes a lot of time. And you need to have vast amounts of inventory. Tobacco, our company has over 7 years of inventory. We grew 20% per year the next 5 years. That's really the secret. You can't work bale to bale. You have to do things right. The next thing is you have to properly make the cigars once you get that tobacco. And then you have to have different quality control steps. You have to check, first of all, the first thing is to make sure the blend is in its proper placement. To us, one of the most important things with a cigar is the taste of the cigar and the consistency of blends. How many cigars have you smoked where you said, I love this cigar, and then you smoke the next one, you go, boy, it doesn't taste the same.
Right
That's got to
on.
be very, yeah. And the next thing is frustration outside of the blend is the draw. And with technology
Yep.
today, we can draw test the cigars. And to me, you should draw test every one of them, regardless of price point or so on. Any cigar that doesn't draw shouldn't be put in a box of cigars. The company, we make over 20 million cigars a year. We had 3 complaints last year. And out of the 3 complaints, which is it's so minuscule, it's not even, you can't even use numbers on it. A lot, I think 2 of them were operator error, tearing the band off a cold cigar. One guy didn't know you were supposed to cut the cigar. One
Yep.
guy lit on the side, and so on and so on. So to me, consistency is everything. And we have a very rigorous quality control check outside of draw testing, hand tension, turns, and so on and so on. We actually check the cigars, like I said earlier, 18 times. Even when you see the people in packaging, they pull all the cigars back out to make sure that every single cigar, whether it be right-handed or left-handed, is put in that box correctly. We color sort the whole box. We don't color sort left to right. To me, that's ludicrous. My dad always said when you pick up the cigar from the box, the one underneath better look exactly the same. These are points that are very hard, but they do. And then once you ferment tobacco, you're trying to marry them, the flavors in their bales, regardless of whether light, medium, or strong tobaccos. But when you finish making a cigar, you should put it in the cedar line aging room for a minimum of 6 months and age that cigar. So all those flavors interlock and marry so that cigar tastes intended the way it was intended by us who blended that particular cigar. And finally, my tasting panel has over 375 years of experience. So for us, when we cigar, It takes us about 2 to 3 years. And a lot of it has to do with packaging, but a lot of it has to do with us coming to some sort of consensus. Might not be your flavor characteristic or his flavor characteristic, but the cigar's got to be outstanding. And that's why brands like Champagne have been out for 23 years. Perdomo Habano's been out for 23 years. Fresco 22, Lot 23, 24 years. My youngest brand is our 20th anniversary, which was we celebrate our 20th 10 years ago, and that brand continues climbing as old brands like Champagne that have been out for decades keep growing every year. The retailer doesn't need new and new and new. He needs consistent, great product that sells time and time again, just like in any other industries where they have a lot of longevity. I never want to throw something against the wall and hope it sticks.
Right on. I think that was beautifully said. And just to add on top of the one of many beautiful blends that you guys have in our catalog, a fan favorite is the Perdomo 12-year bourbon barrel aged cigar. Now, can you go over that blending process briefly? How is that tobacco kind of aged? Is it actually sitting in a barrel for 12 years, or what exactly happens?
So I'm a big lover of single malt scotches, and before the boom came with single malt scotches, the a single malt scotch was 10 years old, it would be 12 years old. You would see it on the tag. So my father was alive during the first evolution of the Perdomo 12-year double H vintage. And what I wanted to do was come out with fillers, binders, and wrappers that were aged for 10 years. And then I wanted to take them to a bourbon barrel and age them in bourbon barrels for 2 years. And the bourbon barrels don't infuse bourbon into the tobacco. What it does is the free radicals of the alcohol inside the barrels do three things. First of all, it caramelizes tobaccos and brings the sugars up, darkens the cassid colors naturally because you get another fermentation period. And because the barrels are charred on the inside, what it does is charcoal's a filtering agent, takes any of the rough edges out. And because the barrels are unvarnished, tobacco needs oxygen to breathe, and it breathes. And what that does is that really makes the tobacco taste to its exact amount of tobacco corn. What makes that cigar so special is I have it certified. Those tobaccos are actually 12 years old before they're put in. And you're one of the few. We only have 130 stores in the United States that carry the brand. Mind you, we have thousands of stores that carry our brands in the U.S. So it's really for the dealer who wants to sell something special, and it's for the dealer who knows how to hand sell. So that brand's not necessarily in our biggest moving stores. It's in stores that we feel that the clerk, the manager, the owner is going to present this box of cigars and explain and sell the cigar to show the consumer how special the cigar is. Like you would see in London 20 years ago, where it wasn't about just selling cigars; it was to show you how special the cigars are. And today, the barrel aging process is so important to us that regardless of any cigar we make, we always barrel age the wrappers, depending whether it's Connecticut, sun-grown, or Maduro. We'll age those wrappers in the barrels anywhere from 10 months to 2 years, depending on the texture of the tobacco. But we find that to be so important for the taste of our cigars and so on. So that's what makes 12 years special. We've had the brand out for 4 years. We have two more evolutions, and we basically are going to run out of the tobacco. A lot of people always ask, why don't you make this cigar anymore? And I always say, well, it was a vintage, and once the vintage is done, it's done. I don't understand how some of these brands have vintages for 25 years and it never ends.
Yeah.
Tobacco has if you're going to say I'm going to use this year, or this particular crop year, sooner or later it's gonna end. But it's a wonderful cigar. I love it.
Without question. And then you also mentioned just now or earlier before that the importance of maintaining the humidity of the blend after it's completed is crucial. I also watched a video of you recently talk about you like to keep yours at around 65% humidity. Can you give a brief explanation or some advice to our friends and customers as to why is your preference 65% humidity, and what should others be looking to keep theirs at?
Well, there was this big misconception: cigars have to be at 70% humidity, and in reality, in some instances, it should be that way. The thinner tobaccos need more humidity. Tobacco is basically a sponge. The thicker the tobaccos, the more lush the tobaccos are, the more oilier the tobaccos are because they absorb moisture quickly. You want to bring the humidity levels down. So we have found out that optimally our cigars smoke best and about 13% moisture, 65% humidity. And mind you, when you come to our factory, we basically have a center underneath the facility that distills water. And we have 14 different concepts of humidity. If you're fermenting tobacco, you need 81% humidity. Tobaccos have to be supple and they have to absorb moisture, so they heat up naturally. But when a finished cigar, a Perdomo cigar, the optimum for that cigar to burn correctly is 65%. If you're smoking tobacco with really thin textures, drier type tobaccos, like for example from the Dominican Republic or Cuba, I would say go up to 70, because those tobaccos are more floral. They're a little bit thinner. They don't have as much oil or grease or texture like we call it. So the thinner the tobaccos, they need a little more humidity. Tobaccos are more lush, thick, more oily. They need less humidity. And I know for a fact that 65% is optimum. A dry cigar is not good. A wet cigar is even worse.
Right.
You really have it where it needs to be. And optimally 65% is. And in most American humidors today, most people are keeping their cigars at about 65%. And people seem to be pretty happy with it.
Yeah, so you mentioned like a dry cigar is bad and a wet cigar is even worse. But if it like obviously for Perdomo cigars, they're Nicaraguan tobacco, you would keep it at 65. Just many of the reasons why is because it's the texture of the tobacco you mentioned.
Yeah, the texture, the thickness. Remember, a lot of these fillers, especially from the SLE Valley, they're like shoe leather. So if you give them too much moisture, they'll absorb that moisture, and then that cigar will be musty, and you won't be able to taste the blend the way we designed the actual cigar to taste. Another thing for the market too, especially in Canada, when you buy a Perdomo cigar, it's ready to be smoked today. The aging and the fermentation and curing, that's my job. That's not your job. Your job is when you buy and you spend your hard-earned money on the cigar, your job is to enjoy the cigar. Okay? It's like a cook. If I have a dried aged steak and you have a regular supermarket steak, and we cook exactly to the same degree, and we use salt, pepper, garlic, and olive oil, let's say on the actual steak, the 5-year-old or I'm sorry, the dry aged steak is always going to taste better because it's like tobacco. It was properly cured, it was fermented and aged. That young piece of meat that you bought at the supermarket is not nearly going to taste the same. And when manufacturers tell you that you should buy cigars and put them away for so many years, to me, it's very erroneous. If you don't have the right seed and if you don't have the right grounds and you don't grow the tobacco, you're not going to have a great cigar regardless how many years you're going to keep it. You can keep it for 3 years, you're going to have a 3-year-old piece of shit. It's not going to make a big difference. It really starts with the manufacturer, and there are some great manufacturers out there. And great manufacturers will tell you that our job is to basically ferment, cure, age that tobacco, and we make that cigar and we age it too. A lot of people like to continue aging cigars. Basically what happens is, if we design a cigar to be full body, 3/4, medium body, every year that cigar starts biochemically and the bunch starts becoming lighter and lighter and lighter. And some people like that, and that's fine, but it's not intended the way the flavor that we designed as blenders for our particular cigar. So when you buy a cigar, a Perdomo cigar, just enjoy it. You can guarantee that our pride and passion was done correctly in that cigar, and it was meant to be tasted the way it was intended to be.
Absolutely, absolutely, very well said. And just out of curiosity, would you happen to have a favorite blend of yours, or do you strictly smoke New World cigars, or what does your humidor look like?
I smoke everything, but I have to be honest with you, I'm a fan of Nicaraguan tobacco. I think it's the best tobacco in the world. My father always said the same thing. But I smoke everybody's cigars because it's like if I have a great restaurant, I got to taste other people's stuff, and I want to get ideas. The only thing is the finishing touches that we do with our cigars, I taste. So a lot of times I don't taste those in different cigars. So for example, the barrel aging process is something that's very crucial to us, and I taste it. And it's not the bourbon, but I taste that extra fermentation. I taste those sharp edges on the tobacco, and so on and so on. But no, I don't understand how people say I only smoke my cigars. No, I smoke everybody's cigars, but I gotta be honest with you, Perdomo's my favorite. And yeah, but I smoke
Yeah.
everybody's. I was in Russia about 10 years ago, and they had all these cigar makers there, and they had Dominican cigars, Honduran cigars, Mexican cigars, and Nicaraguan cigars. It was my birthday, so they didn't want me to partake because the Russian culture. Oh, it's your birthday. You shouldn't be doing this. And I'm sitting in this chair and everybody's getting it wrong. So I said, I'd like to do it. So they blindfolded me. And the first cigar, I said, this is very floral. This is from the Dominican Republic. Next cigar, they said, you're right. Next cigar, I smoked. I'm blindfolded, mind you. And I said, this is very metallic. I said, this is actually good tobacco. The sheet blended. This tobacco's from Mexico. They said, you're right. The third cigar I lit, it didn't draw. I said, this must be a Cuban cigar. And
Oh,
I said, okay, we're going to mix it up. We're going to give you another cigar. Next cigar I smoked, I said, this is gritty. It's from Honduras. And they said, okay, we're going to put two more cigars in here. We're going to mix it around. The next cigar, I said, well, it's only Cuban and Nicaraguans left. They said, no, we might put a Dominican. Might put something else in there. So the next cigar I smoked, I said, this is a Perdomo 20th anniversary Sunday. And they flipped out. They couldn't believe it. And I said, well, what freaks me out is how everybody got this wrong. I mean, this is what we do for a living. Do I use Dominican tobacco for a Perdomo blend? No. But I use Dominican tobacco for some of the blends I make for some of the catalog companies. So I should know what Dominican tobacco tastes. We use Honduran tobaccos and some blends we make for some private label marks for big catalog companies. I should know how Honduran tobacco tastes. And so on.
yeah.
So we caught a crop of Maduro wrappers from Mexico 3 years ago from a young chap, and we've actually bought 3 successive years. He's done very well in life. He looks like you, a real young guy like that, and we wanted to help a young chap. We haven't even used the tobacco. It's something we're going to use in the future, but I have it aging. I have a lot of tobaccos, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and that's important for us, and that's what builds our consistency and why we're known for our attention to detail and quality control. To me, it's very important. I'm very picky when I buy stuff. And there are certain brands that I buy because I know they work and they're consistent. And my whole thing is you're a retailer. So I told this to my son. A lot of guys have heard this. I told my son the only thing I care about is a guy like you can be confident in showing any Perdomo product, knowing that cigar is going to burn correctly, it's going to draw correctly, and it's going to perform each and every time. And I want that consumer to say exactly what you just told me 5 minutes ago. They've never smoked a bad Perdomo cigar. And my
Exactly.
career, you're a young guy. I'm an old guy. I'm a grandpa. The only thing I care about is that you're confident and our consumers are happy. And I want to be happy when I buy things. You know what? I don't really give many second chances. So I'm real cognizant that if these products aren't perfect, people might not come back to buying that product. And I think that's how we grew from a small company in 1992 out of a garage to being always in the 1, 2, or 3 range anywhere in America, in any humidor in North America. And we're proud of that.
That's very well said. And so, like, obviously, you keep touching on the importance and the many different factors of growing tobacco. I'm just curious, is there a single most important element when it comes to growing tobacco?
Well, outside of meteorological conditions, I think the most important thing about growing tobacco is the seed. And we're very stringent on the seed variety. We're also stringent on the seed not being cross-pollinated, so we protect the seed if we're going to grow any tobacco plants for seed. And then the second thing is you got to have your grounds prepared really well. You have to have the right amount of nutrients in those grounds prior to them growing. And we use a drip system. And what we do is we actually can pelletize a water droplet with the exact amount of parts per millions of algicide, fungicide, and fertilizer nutrients to go right into the root base. We don't apply any topical water on our tobacco. We actually grow in the drought season. That's one of the secrets of Nicaragua. Nicaragua means never without water. We have an abundance amounts of water. We have an abundance amount of sunshine, and that sunshine builds tremendous amount of photosynthesis. And we have volcanic grounds that are loaded with the big 3, which is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And those are the things that many grounds around the world in a lot of different countries that grow tobacco don't have. And that's really the secret in Nicaragua. We have great infrastructure. We have great curing bars. Everything is spotless. The infrastructure is outstanding. And that's what makes Nicaragua the best in the world today, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that statement for sure. And when it comes to like the actual growing of the tobacco, I heard you once say that you can almost sometimes hear the tobacco growing. How true is that statement?
It's absolutely true. I said it. I had a guy one time and I said, tobacco grows so quick that you can hear it grow, especially early in the morning. It can grow upwards to an inch and a half a day. tobacco grows extremely quick. Remember the cycle of tobacco, once you transplant it out of the greenhouses, it's only in the fields for between 65 and 70 days for the whole year. So basically, you ever hear Rice Krispies, the cereal? When you
Yeah.
put something here like snap, crackle, and pop. That's how it sounds like. So this guy questioned me, he was a retailer out of Arizona. I said, let's get up tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock because the sun gets up at 4:45 in the morning in Nicaragua. And I
Yeah.
said, you're seeing it. So when it's cool, especially with the cool fronts in the morning, you could see this tobacco and hear the tobacco grow. And any grower who's worth his weight in salt will tell you what I'm telling you is actually the truth. It's a fascinating plant.
Right on. So besides the quality and the excellence behind Perdomo cigars, what I also think of when I think of your brand is tradition, and that comes with the importance of family. And you're always prioritizing the importance of family every time I see something related to your brand in the media. Can you circle back and talk about how big of a role that plays in the success of your company?
It's the biggest role, and
Yeah.
it's kind of funny because look, my mother's 90. She she's not that well now, but she worked all the way till she was 89. My father passed away with the company. My uncle passed away with the company. I have a guy that works for me today. He's going to be 94 next week, still with the company. And we've had a lot of longevity. You don't think for a minute those people to me are like line extensions of my family also. But to have my brother work with the company, to have my wife work with the company, not the easiest thing in the world, mind you. And having my son work for the company. And then, guys like Arthur Kemper, who've been with me for 24 years, or Nelson Cuba, who runs our operations. I've known since I was 11 years old. Family is a really important thing for me. I'm super hyper focused on work and dedication to my work and so on. In my off time, what I like to be is with my family and friends. It's very paramount to me, to be with family, and it's a blessing that you can work with so many members of your family. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing, but we've made it work. And a lot of the employees have been with me for so many years. To me, they're like members of my family also.
Yeah, and I feel like that's so relatable because obviously, I mean, I mentioned to you earlier before we recorded that this is a family business for our retail shop here in Canada, and it is a blessing. And of course, you have your ups and downs, but ultimately, like you want to get through with nobody except for your family. Like it's the best part about it for us. So the one of the final few questions here I have for you because I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy man. I know you mentioned you have tobacco being aged like for long durations of time, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Is there any new blends in the works that you're able to speak about, or would you rather not?
Sure, we have two that are coming out. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary, which was last
Wow.
year, but we're not. But because of our packaging people and the COVID thing, unlike most places in the world, I live in the free state of Florida, and we never shut down, we never masked up, we never did anything. And because of us not following any of these draconian rules, we had the lowest form of death, we had the lowest COVID incidents, and we had the lowest form of suicide and depression because people got to carry on with their lives. Unfortunately, our band makers aren't in Florida, they're in Europe, and anytime a guy would sneeze, they would close the factory. So what happened was they got really behind, and that's the reason we didn't come out with our 30th last year. But the consumer's going to win. The cigars have been in aging; they'll sit in the aging rooms for an extra year, and we're bringing them out, and quite possibly we're coming out with a new brand that's coming out too. We don't really come out with a lot of brands, Joseph. It takes us 2 to 3 years to come out with a proper dosage or blend and really have it rock solid where we feel comfortable to be able to sell it to you guys and our retailers around the world. So I think I got a pretty good portfolio of cigars.
Absolutely. Yeah, without question.
One of the recommendations I could give retailers out there is they always want to carry something new. And I was just recently in South Miami, and a guy said, I love your cigars. And he had a big wall of cigars like this in the store. And the consumer said, I love your cigars. I've been smoking for 25 years. Anything to recommend? I said, yeah. I said, have you ever smoked the Perdomo Reserve Champagne? He said, I haven't. I said, well, it's new to you, and it's pretty cool. It's been a brand that's probably sold in excess of 50 or 60 million cigars, so it's time and proven. Give that a shot. And he loved it. So there's always something new for somebody. I don't care. Look, I've had retailers carrying our brands since our inception and carry everything we make, over 100 facings of cigars. But there's always something that someone didn't smoke, and to me, that's new. I never like to buy the newest model of the car. I like to find out if it's consistent. So a lot of times guys selling cigars, they get kind of boxed in and they go, well, this isn't new and this isn't new, but it could be to a consumer. So sometimes you got to say, well, have you tried this? If he hasn't, of course it's a new product. But the last new product we came out with was the 10-year Sun Grown and a 10-year Maduro, which, by the way, won 3 accolades. It won Cigar of the Year in the Cigar Journal, it won Cigar of the Year in Tobacco Business Daily, which is our big trade magazine. And it won Cigar of the Year in the Cigar Authority, David Garofalo's podcast, which is the biggest podcast in the world for cigars. And he's a dear friend of mine. And what I was most proud about winning those accolades was it was the consumer who voted for it. And there were hundreds of thousands of consumers that actually voted for this. And that brand won all 3 different periodicals. And to me, that means more than 3 guys who tell you they taste hints of chestnut and balsam, which, by the way, being in the cigar industry for so many years, I've never tasted any of those things in a cigar, to be quite honest with you. So I'm proud of that. But those brands have been out for 3 years. That's really the youngest brand we have. So we're going to come in with the 30th anniversary and quite possibly one more for our trade show in Las Vegas in July.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that. I haven't been to a trade show in Las Vegas before, but I'm definitely planning on the one in July this year. So yeah, we're pretty excited. I have a question here from a live viewer right now, and I think this is a long shot, but one can only be optimistic. Is there like a possibility of a Canadian exclusive blend, or is that kind of something that, takes a lot of time to figure out, like you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it's super hard to figure out. We don't even have an exclusive blend for the United States. We love Canada. The problem is your government is just so restrictive. I mean, look how beautiful these cigars look in the packaging, and to be able to have to put them in bundles and take the bands off. I was in Vancouver about 8 years ago. I never saw anything so draconian in my life. It's all pornographic material. You go on Mason Street and everybody's shooting heroin and smoking crack, no problem.
Yeah, they have quite the worst reputation in Canada.
I had to hide in the corner with my son to be able to smoke a cigar. I never saw anything like it in my life. And I root for you guys. I know it's not easy, but to come out with an exclusive brand for Canada would be very tough. The market share is small, not because of the Canadians, but because of the draconian laws. So probably not.
Right. Well, I think that puts us at about the time limit here. Like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. And thank you so much for taking all the time you took today to help educate our Canadian viewers. I'm sure they had such a great time being so well informed. You're very knowledgeable, obviously, given all your decades and generational experience. So it's been an honor.
My honor too. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Long live Canada.
All right, Nick. Hopefully, we'll talk to you soon in the future, and have a great day.
Thank you. You have a great day too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Bye.